pretending like illegal immigrants are the biggest threat to the average American. Have you ever noticed how every time people start talking about real issues, they start talking about mass deportations? Like it's just like clockwork. They tell us that it's about keeping us safe, about getting the bad guys out. But here's the truth. The vast majority of people being rounded up have no serious criminal record. And meanwhile, the actual threats to our safety, they're out there thriving. And I really want to talk about that. So the story that they sell us is that these raids are actually targeting criminals primarily, that ICE is going after the worst of the worst. But when you look at the numbers, that's just not true. According to the latest ICE data, so stuff from all of last year, deportations hit a 10-year high. So all of 2024, they hit a 10-year high. And guess what? The majority of the people being deported were not violent criminals. Many had no criminal record at all. Or at worst, it was just minor offenses like traffic violations, those things. So why are they pushing so hard? Why are they pushing this narrative? Because it's easier to get people angry, furious at their undocumented neighbors than it is to get them to look at the actual problems. So it's a distraction. It's a fear tactic. So it's a way to, the most classic way to make people feel like something's being done while the real dangers are actually being ignored and nothing is being done at all. In real life, undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit violent crimes than native-born Americans. Think about it. They have a lot more to lose. So they're a lot more scared of the law. But let's be real though. Every time the economy is acting up, suddenly it's all about mass deportations. We need to take our country back. We need to crack down on illegal immigration. Meanwhile, real threats, ignored, just plain ignored. So if you've been hearing all this noise and wondering, well, should I be worried? The answer is probably yes, but not for the reasons they want you to be. Because, spoiler alert, this is not about keeping you safe. It's not about keeping us safe at all. It's about distraction. It's about fear and political games. So I kind of want to break that down. Listen, I get it. If you're undocumented, if you have family who is like me, or if you just care about the people in your community, all this talk about mass deportation is going to feel terrifying, and I understand that. But that's exactly the point. That's why it's there. That's why these tactics are there. But if we talk facts, are mass deportations actually happening? Are undocumented immigrants really the problem? And why do politicians keep bringing this up? Even when it's not even the biggest issue we're facing, not even close to the biggest issue we're facing. So if we cut out all of that, like we cut through the noise, first things first, are politicians really planning mass deportations? The short answer is probably not. It just doesn't seem realistic. Why? Because the people yelling about deporting millions of immigrants love money way too much to actually do it. Think about it. Agriculture runs on undocumented labor. You deport them and you're looking at empty grocery store shelves, skyrocketing food prices. What else is there? Construction. Good luck finishing houses and highways when the workforce disappears, which is all made up of immigrants. Hospitality, restaurants, caregiving, same story. These industries fund politicians. They pay for campaigns. They lobby Congress. You think big donors are going to let their workforce vanish, just leave because of some policy? The reality is politicians just say mass deportations are happening to rile people up and make you look the other way, just be distracted while they ignore the real issues. So, and let's be honest, no smart person actually believes this idea that immigrants are actually dangerous. So this is one of the biggest lies out there. Study after study shows, and this has happened forever, right? Study after study has shown that undocumented immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than U.S. citizens. The Cato Institute has shown that. DHS has shown that, but the sad reality is that fear sells. It keeps the news cycles running. It gives politicians easy talking points, and it stops people from paying attention to actual threats. Like what, you ask? So glad that you did. Now, if we're going to talk about real threats that harm the average American can actually face, let's actually talk about those threats. Or better yet, let's take it a step further and address those threats. So here I put together 10 things, just 10 random things that I know for a fact are way more dangerous to the average American than some undocumented neighbor trying to survive. So 10 real threats to the average American. Number 1, government corruption. So polls show that America's number one fear is corrupt politicians, not immigrants. Number 2, economic instability. Rising cost of living, inflation, housing crisis. These are all hitting Americans harder than ever. But yeah, sure, let's focus on deporting farm workers. Number 3, healthcare costs. Over half of bankruptcies in the United States happen because people can't afford medical bills. So deporting someone's grandma doesn't change that. Number 4, gun violence. Over 48,000 Americans died from gun violence last year, 2024. Did you know the United States experiences 1 to 2 mass shootings per day on average? We do. But undocumented immigrants are the biggest threat. Make it make sense. It just doesn't. Number 5, climate change. Wildfires, hurricanes, flooding, tornadoes, natural disasters are getting worse every year. Deporting a single mom from Guatemala is not going to fix that. Number 6, cyber security threats. Identity theft, cyber attacks, and data breaches are on the rise. Your bank account is at more risk from hackers than from some immigrant trying to make a living. Number 7, domestic terrorism. According to the Department of Homeland Security, homegrown extremist groups pose a far greater threat than immigrants. But let's keep pretending they don't exist. Number 8, opioid epidemic. Fentanyl overdoses are killing thousands of Americans, and yet the focus is on people picking strawberries. Also, this idea that immigrants are to blame for this. Most fentanyl smugglers are U.S. citizens. 86% of fentanyl trafficking convictions were U.S. citizens, not undocumented immigrants. The overwhelming majority of fentanyl entering the country is done through legal ports. So they're legal ports of entry, not carried by individuals crossing the border illegally. They can't even carry basic needs like food and water, let alone drugs. Number 9, infrastructure collapse. This one is actually one I learned about very recently. So bridges are literally crumbling. Roads are falling apart. 42% of U.S. bridges are over 50 years old and they require maintenance or replacement. Over 46,000 of our nation's bridges are classified as structurally deficient, meaning they are in poor condition and they require significant repairs. What else? Our electrical grid is facing challenges due to aging infrastructure, which costs us, American taxpayers, money. America is projected to fall $1.44 trillion short of the necessary infrastructure spending through 2025. But yeah, let's pour billions into rates instead. Number 10, political division. The way people are being pitted against each other is one of the biggest threats to our country. Also the most disgusting tactic ever. And guess what? Targeting immigrants is part of that playbook. So these here are the real dangers to the average American. But instead of fixing them, they feed us a villain that doesn't actually exist, or it's being way overblown out of proportion. This isn't about safety. It's about cruelty. It's about control. And it's about distracting us from the real threats. So what do we do about it? Because quite frankly, sitting back and watching it happen just is not an option, at least not for me. So call out the lies. Every time someone says, oh, immigrants are the problem, mass deportations, I support them, hit them with the facts. The real threats are the ones they aren't talking about. Bring them up. Support the right policies. Immigration reform is long overdue. We need pathways to citizenship, non-mass deportations that break families apart. Also get involved. Support organizations that help undocumented families. There's groups like Raíces and the ACLU. They're fighting for justice. Stop falling for distractions. The next time they start shouting about deportations, just ask yourself, what else is happening right now? Because you can bet it's a distraction from something bigger. And so listen. At the end of the day, deporting people isn't making us safer. It's just making us crueler. The biggest dangers we face have nothing to do with immigrants. They have everything to do with greed, with corruption, and misplaced priorities. So that is all I have to say about that. Thank you very much for being here today in another episode of The Sarai Show. I will see you guys tomorrow. And remember, stay smart, stay safe, and stay true to yourself.